Welcome to Nutrition for Food Service and Culinary Professionals, Chapter 6. Today we're going to be covering the chapter on vitamins. Unlike the macronutrients, protein, fat, carbohydrates, vitamins and minerals do not provide energy to fuel the body. And this may come as a surprise to many. A lot of people pop supplements for energy, but the reality is food containing protein, carbohydrate, and fat provide energy. Vitamins and minerals are the spark plugs that enable your body to use protein, carbohydrate, and fat for energy. Unfortunately, there's no way to make the next two chapters a party. So refresh what you already know about vitamins and absorb what you don't know. There really is a lot to learn about supplements in general. As I've mentioned before, there's no perfect food that contains all the vitamins you need in just the right amount. The best way to ensure an adequate vitamin intake is to eat a varied diet and a balanced diet of plant and animal foods. So, keep that in mind as the main point of this chapter and the next chapter, that the best way to ensure an adequate vitamin intake is to eat a varied and balanced diet. Here's some trivia. In the early 1900s, scientists thought they had found the compounds needed to prevent scurvy and pellagra, two diseases that were caused by vitamin deficiencies. The compounds originally were believed to belong to a class of compounds called amines and were names from the Latin vita, or life, plus amine, and that's where the word vitamin, came from. Later, the E was dropped when it was found that not all substances were amines. At first, no one knew what they were chemically, so vitamins were identified by letters. Later, what was thought to be one vitamin turned out to be many, and then numbers were added, such as vitamin B6. Then some vitamins were found to be unnecessary for human needs and were removed from the list. This accounts for some of the numbering gaps. For example, B6 was later found not to be a vitamin. Okay, so what are we going to cover today? This chapter is really an overview of vitamins, their functions, and their food sources. Chefs and culinary professionals generally do not need to know the specific milligrams and micrograms for specific vitamins. For purposes of meal planning and menu planning, best food sources for major vitamins are necessary. So, in other words, we're going to cover a little bit of information about the vitamins in terms of how much a person needs in a day. But again, if you just go back to the My Plate and the guidelines that are suggested in the dietary guidelines for Americans, all that is covered. So after completing this chapter, you'll be able to explain the roles of vitamins and what part they play in growth and good health, and list some of the just general functions and food sources of water-soluble and fat-soluble vitamins. You'll be able to explain a little bit about what phytochemicals are and maybe give some examples, and identify cooking techniques that promote retention of nutrients, because that's really the most important thing. You can eat foods that have vitamins, but if you're not storing them properly and preparing them properly, then many times those nutrients are lost. So I don't want you to be intimidated by this chapter. I think a lot of students feel like they have to do rote memorization, but think about what you already know. Like in terms of, just to give you an example, vitamin A, I think a lot of people realize that vitamin A is for good vision or vision health or eye health. And, one of the major sources of vitamin A is carrots. So I think there's a lot of things that you probably already know that you don't even really, think about. And in going through here, you'll be able to review some things and maybe add to your knowledge. We're also going to talk about guidelines for purchasing supplements, including when they're appropriate, because, as a nutrition professional, I would always suggest that you try to get your nutrients from food first. And then, as in the other chapters, there's a lot of chef tips, including creative and healthy menu ideas for fruits and vegetables. So, here we go. Let's talk a little bit about the basics of vitamins. Vitamins are non-caloric, meaning they have no calories, which means they have no energy source. Organic nutrients that are found in a wide variety of foods that are essential in small quantities to regulate body processes, maintain the body, and allow for growth and reproduction. In other words, vitamins do not contain calories, and so they do not directly provide energy to the body. Vitamins provide energy indirectly because they are involved in extracting energy from carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. I think that's important to repeat because, as I mentioned before, a lot of people pop vitamins feeling like they need energy, when in reality, I like to compare it to your car in that they're like the spark plugs that enable your body to use the protein, carbohydrate, and fat for energy. So when you think about a diet that is, generally healthy with whole food, you're going to provide a lot more energy for your body as opposed to eating, foods that don't have a lot of calorie density, and they're not going to really provide your body with good energy because they don't have the vitamins and minerals in them that it takes to provide energy for the body. Vitamins, again, are organic substances that carry out body processes that are vital to health. Only very small amounts are needed, and that doesn't mean that they're not necessary or that they're not important. It's just that we only need small amounts, and almost all of it can be obtained from the foods that you eat. They have a very important role in the body, each and every one. And most vitamins are obtained by eating food, but some are made by intestinal bacteria, and one, if any of you can think about which one that is made in the skin in sunlight. Sometimes a form of a vitamin in food is a precursor. So again, the foods that, or the vitamins that are produced by bacteria in the intestine are then absorbed into the body. And then vitamin D is the one that is produced when the skin is exposed to sunlight. So we're going to cover all these different vitamins, but it's important to talk about the basics first. Like I always mention, there is no perfect food that contains all the vitamins in the right amounts, and that's why it's so critical to get a good variety. Even a vitamin supplement that people take only has what's in that supplement. Whereas when you're eating whole food, when you're eating food, and especially eating it in combination with all the other food groups, there's synergy going on. There's a lot of interaction between the foods and possibly compounds that we're not even familiar with yet. So it's important to get a good variety and not limit yourself. Vitamins have no calories, we mentioned that, and they're involved in extracting energy from carbs, fats, and protein. Fresh fruits and vegetables are very rich in vitamins, but they also lose vitamins as they lose their freshness. And that's why it's important as we go along to talk about, how we shop for them, how we store them, and how we cook them. When we talk about cooking, vegetables, especially in water or in oil, the temperature and the time also affects the degree of vitamin loss. Heat can destroy vitamins, particularly the water-soluble vitamins, such as vitamin C and the B vitamins. Short cooking methods such as stir-frying and blanching help to reduce vitamin loss compared to longer cooking methods such as boiling. Not a real concern when it comes to some of the water-soluble vitamins like vitamin C. Our diet is so rich in vitamin C, and you obtain it from so many different fruits and vegetables that even if some is lost in cooking, it's not like you're going to be lacking in that vitamin because it's so readily obtainable. Steaming is also preferable to boiling because vitamins can't leak into the boiling water. There's a table, it's called Table 6-8 on page 175 of your textbook, and it gives some really good tips on preventing vitamin loss in the preparation and cooking of fruits and vegetables. Whereas you absorb most of the carbs you eat, vitamins are absorbed in varying degrees. It's called bioavailability. That is the degree to which a nutrient is absorbed and used in the body. That term again is bioavailability. The bioavailability of a vitamin may depend on whether the food is cooked or raw, which other foods are eaten at the same time, and how well the food went through the GI tract. So again, it's important to consider all these things and understand that they're important, but from a culinary professional perspective, it's mostly important to talk about where you're sourcing and how you're preparing and how important it is to get variety. There are two categories of vitamins. One category is fat soluble and one is water soluble. And basically they're classified according to how soluble they are in water or fat. The fat-soluble vitamins are A, D, E, and K. Some people like to say ADEC. That's a good way to remember the 4 vitamins. They occur in foods containing fat. That makes sense, fat-soluble. They're stored in the body until needed. So as opposed to water-soluble that are flushed out, they're actually stored in your body fat. Makes sense. It includes A, D, and K, and it's absorbed and transported around the body in the same way as fats. Water-soluble vitamins, on the other hand, include vitamin C, your B-complex vitamins, and B vitamins work in every cell where they function as a part of coenzyme. And a coenzyme is a helper. It combines with an enzyme to allow the enzyme in the body to do its job. And the body stores it for varying periods of time, but it needs to be taken on a regular basis because what your body doesn't need is flushed out because it is water soluble. And, that's why a lot of times you'll hear health professionals say that Americans have very expensive urine because from taking a lot of supplements, your body generally just flushes out what it doesn't need. And you can get so much of it from your food. So let's expand a little more on your water-soluble vitamins. Water-soluble vitamins are a group of vitamins that are soluble in water and stored in the body for varying lengths of time. They include C, thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, vitamin B6, folate, vitamin B12, pantothenic acid, and biotin. The water-soluble vitamins C and B should be consumed daily because they're not stored except for some B6 and B12, and they're lost in body fluids. Water-soluble vitamins are found in basic foods such as meat, grains, fruits, and vegetables. They can be leached out of foods and easily destroyed by incorrect storage or preparation. Excess water-soluble vitamins are generally excreted in the urine, so toxicity is very rare. So, it makes a lot of sense when we're talking about water-soluble vitamins, the fat-soluble vitamins that are stored in fat, toxicity can be more common. We'll cover each one of these vitamins individually. The next grouping is called fat-soluble vitamins, and they're carried in lipids or fats, and they're stored in fatty tissue and also in your liver. Now, they can reach toxic levels if taken in excess over time. You'll never see toxicity related to actual food intake, but the fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K can potentially become toxic if you're taking excessive amounts of supplementation. These are the vitamins that generally are not consumed enough in the American diet, and those are A, D, E, folate, vitamin C, and that's because Generally, Americans aren't eating enough fruits and vegetables. Generally, Americans aren't eating the correct amount of milk in a day. The reason vitamin C is a problem for Americans is primarily because of the low intake of fruits and vegetables. Vitamin A is contained in fruits and vegetables. Um, Vitamin D is contained primarily in milk. Vitamin E is primarily contained in vegetable oils and also dark green leafy vegetables. But vitamin D is really the most serious deficiency because it's essential for bone health. Vitamin D comes along with calcium-rich products like milk, and it's very important to consider, having dairy in the diet so that you can get adequate vitamin D. Vitamin D helps your body unlock its ability to use calcium. So let's just briefly look at some of the vitamin deficiency diseases. One of the criteria to be a vitamin is that the absence of the substance causes a specific deficiency disease. So what are those diseases? In the case of vitamin C, scurvy. Vitamin A, one of the deficiencies would be night blindness. A vitamin D deficiency is rickets and osteomalacia. And I point that one out because of the incidence of or the number of people that are now using milk alternatives instead of dairy products to consume as a beverage, people are not getting enough calcium and vitamin D. Even though those products are actually fortified or enriched with calcium and vitamin D, they're not normally there like they are in dairy products. There was one case of rickets in a child in our country and several years ago, and that was probably the first for a lot of years. And it's definitely related to a parent giving a child the alternative milk as opposed to dairy. One of the vitamin deficiency diseases for vitamin E is hemolytic anemia in infants. Vitamin K has, if there's a lack of vitamin K, it could be a problem with bleeding. Thiamine, beriberi, riboflavin, erythoflavinosis, niacin, pellagra, pantothenic acid, parathisia, B6 anemia, biotin, dermatitis and enteritis, B12, a type of anemia called megablastic, and a deficiency of folate is birth and neural defects. So again, the criteria for an item to become a vitamin is that if you don't have it in your diet, it can cause a specific deficiency disease. And that's the only reason I bring that up. So what happens if you have too much? Now, the vitamins in food don't normally cause any toxic symptoms. This is mostly mentioned because of the amount of supplementation people take. There is such a thing as a tolerable upper intake level, and that's the maximum amount that you should take in a vitamin. So again, you'll mostly see toxicity when there's supplements involved, not necessarily food. And the most toxic vitamin in excess is vitamin D. The important thing to remember here is that if you listen to medical reports and physicians speak, many times they're announcing that vitamin D levels are very low and they can contribute to a lot of different diseases in our country. Doctors are promoting vitamin D as a supplement, and many times people are put on thousands of, units of vitamin D. You must remember that the doctors that are prescribing higher levels of vitamin D are also monitoring those people through a blood panel. And that is something to remember, that if you're ever placed on a vitamin D supplement, because it is the most toxic vitamin, it is very important to be monitored by blood work. Okay, so our very first vitamin we're going to cover is vitamin A. Vitamin A is an antioxidant, and it plays a very important role in vision, bone and tooth growth, reproduction, cell functions, and the immune system. The active form of vitamin A is called retinol, and that's found in animal foods such as liver, egg yolks, and dairy products. There are several precursors to retinol. The most active is beta carotene. Beta carotene, which is converted to vitamin A in the intestine, is a pigment found in fruits and vegetables that are bright orange, yellow, and dark green. Beta carotene's bright color makes it easy to identify foods high in vitamin A. So, inadequate vitamin A intake causes changes in eye tissue that can result in vision problems and blindness, as well as changes in the cells that protect organs and skin and act as barriers to bacteria and virus. Excessive vitamin A over a prolonged period of time can be toxic, causing hair loss, bone pain, fatigue, dry, cracked skin, liver damage, high blood pressure, bleeding gums, and birth defects. But again, not to worry, because based on national consumption studies, more than half of Americans don't even consume the recommended daily dietary requirement for vitamin A. So, my message here is add more fruits and vegetables to your menus. Make sure they're colorful and include them often. And don't be concerned about toxicity unless you are consuming heavy doses of vitamin A as a supplement. Here are some of the sources of vitamin A, just to give you an example. Most of them are going to be that, bright orange, red, yellow. 1 cup of carrot juice has about 45,000 international units of vitamin A. 1 cooked sweet potato has 28,000. A cup of cooked carrots has 26,000. Spinach has 18,000. Cantaloupe has 4,500. And one whole papaya has 3,300. So that just kind of gives you an idea. There's obviously, a lot of wonderful vitamin A in your food sources. Some are much better than others. And if you're planning meals and want to know that, there's definitely charts available in your book. But for the purposes of meal planning, it's just so important to get a good variety. Vitamin D is the second fat-soluble vitamin. It's the only vitamin that's also a hormone. Vitamin D, another word for it is calciferol. It acts like a hormone to help the body absorb and regulate calcium and phosphorus for strong bones, teeth, and muscle. Vitamin D, especially in the active form, which is D3, and that's cholecalciferol, may provide protection from osteoporosis, high blood pressure, cancer, and several autoimmune diseases. So the important thing to remember here is that it's important, but it also works with other nutrients to help strengthen bones. So it's needed in combination with one of the minerals called calcium, and that's why dairy products are so beneficial, because they work together. They act. There's a synergy between the two of them when you're choosing dairy in your diet. When ultraviolet rays shine on your skin, you make a precursor of vitamin D. So we get vitamin D from the sun, and the thing to remember there is that there may be a concern about the amount of vitamin D people are getting, because more and more people are being very diligent about using sunscreen. And to get that vitamin D production, you have to be in the sun probably 10 to 15 minutes per day. Very few foods contain vitamin D naturally, except for fatty fish. All milk, like I mentioned, is fortified with vitamin D, some cereals. And if I can give you just some sources, like 3 ounces of pickled herring is about 1,300, almost 1,400 international units. A tablespoon of cod liver oil is 1,300. 3 ounces of halibut is 510. A tablespoon of butter has 9. And ready-to-eat cereal only has about 0.6 to 3 international units. So again, it's important to get your vitamin D from dairy products. Several months of vitamin D can be stored in the body, so it can be helpful during the winter months when sun is not as strong. A majority of adults and children in the United States don't meet the requirement for vitamin D, which is why a lot of doctors are now testing for blood levels of vitamin D and prescribing, heavier doses if people are coming short. As people get older, the amount of vitamin that your body makes from the sun decreases by 50%, which is why many times there's problems with adults meeting that RDA. Vitamin D deficiency in children can cause rickets, and like I mentioned, it was almost extinct in our country until just a couple years ago when the child was diagnosed with rickets as a result of his family providing dairy alternatives. A deficiency of vitamin D in adults can cause osteomalacia, osteopenia, which is really like a precursor to osteoporosis. And that's when your bones become very brittle and the chances of having fractures as you get older are typically seen in older women, but it can also occur in men. Vitamin D is one of the most toxic vitamins when taken in excess of the RDA, which is why it's so important to focus on getting it mostly from the food that you eat. The next fat-soluble vitamin is vitamin E. Another word for vitamin E is tocopherol. It acts also as an antioxidant in cell membranes, and it's especially important for the stability of cells that are constantly exposed to a high level of oxygen, especially your lungs, your brain, and your blood cells. So, vitamin E protects the polyunsaturated fats and other fat soluble substances in your cells from cellular changes that are thought to contribute to cardiovascular disease and cancer. We have what we call free radicals, floating in the environment, which can damage cells. And all of us have the potential for the damage in our cells. So when you're eating a diet that's full of antioxidants, vitamin A, vitamin E rich foods, you're generally able to combat or fight, those particular free radicals that cause cardiovascular disease and cancer. And that's why it's so important to get your nutrition from food, because it really is beneficial from the inside out in terms of protecting yourself against all these lifestyle issues. There's a lot of different foods that contain vitamin E, and you can see here that some of them are fat-containing foods like nuts and seeds and vegetable oils. To give you an example, an ounce of sunflower seeds has 15.5 international units. An ounce of almonds has about 11 international units. 1 tablespoon of canola oil has about 4, and 2 tablespoons of wheat germ has about 4.5. Many people aren't getting adequate amounts of vitamin E, and again, it's important to get it from food and have a wide variety of all these different foods that contain vitamin E. Vitamin K is the very last fat-soluble vitamin. There's no slide for vitamin K, but I want you to remember that it's necessary to make the proteins that are involved in blood clotting. And it also works with vitamin D to help regulate blood calcium levels and form bone. Intestinal bacteria make about half of your body's vitamin K, and the food that you eat provides the rest. Some of the sources of vitamin K are your green leafy vegetables, such as your kale and spinach. For instance, cooked spinach has about 1,027 micrograms, whereas a cup of raw spinach only has 144. Broccoli has about 419, and asparagus has about 91. You'll rarely see deficiencies in vitamin K. Now, when it comes to medications and how it affects some of these vitamins, antibiotics can reduce the vitamin K synthesis, so that might increase dietary needs. Individuals on medications to reduce blood clotting may be instructed to limit or even avoid foods high in vitamin K. So that's one of the considerations for vitamin K when someone's on a blood thinner, that they have to limit the vitamin K intake, and that would be a concern for a health professional if you were cooking for a hospital, a long-term care situation, or working with adults that are on blood thinners. So, fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K. The next group of vitamins we're going to talk about are your water-soluble vitamins. As previously mentioned, water-soluble vitamins, that's vitamin C and all the B vitamins, should be consumed every day because they're not stored and they're lost through body fluids. Vitamin C, another word for vitamin C, is ascorbic acid. It helps to make collagen, which is the structural foundation of cells. It helps keep gums and other tissues healthy. It aids in healing of cuts and wounds. And one of the more important things to remember is it also helps your body to absorb iron. And what I mean by that is iron is a mineral that is in a lot of different foods. When you eat foods that are high in vitamin C along with iron, it's more likely to be absorbed and utilized better. So vitamin C is really important. It has a lot of, specific roles and functions. And it's one of those nutrients that when you have food and you keep it in storage for a long time, or if you cook it with heat, it's destroyed. So that's why it's important to get those daily allowances of vitamin C from foods. Certain population groups may need a little bit more vitamin C. Smokers in particular, women who are pregnant and possibly breastfeeding, and then anyone with fever or infection would require higher levels of vitamin C. In the case of pregnancy, women are generally placed on prenatal vitamins, which include additional vitamin C and also folate, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But it's important to get it every day because it is water soluble. It's water soluble, and it's definitely necessary. But it's also readily available in our food supply. So, what are some of the food sources? Almost all of your citrus and other fruits and vegetables contain vitamin C. And just to give you an example, a half a cup of sweet red bell pepper is about 115 milligrams. The general daily allowance of vitamin C is only 60 milligrams. So you can see just by eating a sweet red pepper, you're getting a lot of vitamin C. In fact, red peppers have twice the amount of vitamin C that a green bell pepper does. And it's actually the same product, it's just been on the vine longer. One medium orange is 70 milligrams, so that's really basically your needs for vitamin C a day. So it doesn't take a lot, but it is very important to include, those fruits and vegetables in your meal planning. Okay, some of the other water-soluble vitamins are sort of linked together. Those are thiamine, riboflavin, and niacin. These are all essential for metabolism of those macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fat.